Hello my amazing developers. So in the previous video, we looked at how to synchronize switch zoom view with the supported camera types. We also looked at how to switch between the back and the front cameras. Then we protected our application in the app switcher by adding a privacy view. And we also added orientation changes support to the capture session controller. In today's video, we will update switch zoom view size when we have 2 cameras rather than 3. Then we will fix application launch issues in landscape orientation. Then we will complete the process of switching between back and front cameras repeatedly. We will improve also the privacy in the app switcher. And we will also look at how to hide the switch zoom view when the user switches to the front camera. And finally, we will look at focus and exposure. So let's get started. We will start with updating the switch zoom view size when we have 2 cameras rather than 3. By that I mean we are on a device where we don't have an ultra-wide camera or we don't have a telephoto. So here we will update the width in the portrait orientation of the switch zoom view, and we will update the height in the landscape orientation. So let's go ahead and do that. I have Xcode open up over here from the previous video. So for updating the switch zoom view size, let's head to the capture view controller. We will start by adding properties on the top of the file. Here I'm going to have 2 properties for constraints for the width and the height constraint of switch zoom view. I'm going to have private var switch zoom view width constraint of type NS layout constraint, and also private var switch zoom view height constraint of type NS layout constraint. Then we will scroll down. In the initialize constraints, we will take these constraints out into the lower part of the method. So let's take the width constraint of the switch zoom view. I'm going to cut it from this place and make sure we remove the line also. And at the end here, I'm going to have this into a constraint. Switch zoom view width constraint. And I'm going to append it to the portrait constraints. Switch zoom view width constraint, and also I'm going to keep a reference of the switch zoom view width constraint. Similarly, we will take the height constraint out of the landscape constraints array and initialize it here. Switch zoom view height constraint, and make sure we append this height constraint of the switch zoom view to the landscape constraints. And also keep a reference of the height constraint into the class property. Next, we will create a method to reduce the size of the switch zoom view. So let's head down where we can create a new method under the private extension. So here I'm going to say reduce switch zoom view size. And for now, I'm going to have a delta of type CG float and going to say delta is 50. Then in the width switch zoom views constraints, the width constraint constant, I'm going to minus it by the delta amount, and the switch zoom views height constraint also will be deducted by the delta amount, which is 50 over here. So let's head up to the method where we are setting up the switch zoom view and hiding the ultra wide or the telephoto button. So here we can call our method which we have created, that is for reducing the switch zoom views size on both of the calls over here. Next, we will have a property that makes sure that we will hide our switch zoom view when we have only one camera. We will cover this part later in more detail when we come to the application launch issues for the landscape orientation. But for now, let's keep a reference. So let's head up to the top of the file and have ourselves a new property, private var should hide switch zoom view, and I'm going to keep it false initially. And in the setup switch zoom view, when we have only the wide angle, that is only one camera, here we should set the property should hide switch zoom view to true, and we are going to change this alpha property into isHidden true. We will also cover this in the application launch issues. So now we will look at fixing application launch issues for the landscape orientation. By that I mean, if a user launches our application when the device is already in landscape mode, so what happens is that our views are aligned to the portrait orientation. So if you remember from the previous videos, we added the record view into the right side in the landscape orientation. So these are the stuff that we will be fixing now. So let's go ahead and do that. So open up the capture view controller nib file and bring in the the right bar and expand our views. Select the switch zoom view and set its property to isHidden. Same property should be applied to the toggle camera view and the record view. Make sure all these properties are set to hidden. Let's head to the capture view controller Swift file, hide the right bar so we have more space, and we will be creating a new method for showing the initial views. We will call it show initial views, and we are going to say record view is hidden property false, but for the should switch zoom view, if we don't have the should hide switch zoom view set to true, that time we will show the switch zoom view. And same thing like record view, we will be doing for the toggle camera view. So let's head to the top of the file where we have view did load. So what we are going to do is we're going to create ourselves a method for view did appear. View did appear, and make sure we call the super view did appear and pass in the animated property. And we will be removing the initialize constraints call of the method from here and pasting it down in the view did appear. And also we will be calling our newly created show initial views in the view did appear. So what this has affected now is when our application launches, we are setting the first three views that we have for the record view, toggle camera view, and the switch zoom view to be hidden. And when the application appears for the user in the view did appear, first we initialize the constraints and then we show the views that appear in the right place. So we don't have these jumps, or we don't have them shown in the wrong place initially. This is why we had set the isHidden property true for all these views. Next, we will be updating the Initialize capture session in the capture session controller, where we will be keeping the completion handler as an optional property, where we don't require to pass the completion handler each and every time the Initialize capture session has been called. So let's go ahead and do that. Open up the capture session controller, and in the Initialize capture session method, let's have a change over here. So completion handler, we will be removing the escape property, and I'm keeping this as an optional and making sure that I have a default value of nil. And similarly, at the end of the function call where we are calling the completion handler, make sure this is set to optional. Now we will be looking at how to switch between back and front cameras repeatedly. So let's see how we can do that. Let's head to the top of the file, and here I'm going to have an enum called CameraPosition, and I'm going to say front and back. Also in the class capture session controller, I'm going to have a new property, private var camera position, and set it to camera position back, because we always initialize our capture session with the back camera. Next, we will be updating the toggle camera to take into account the camera position of the class property and change it accordingly as the user has requested. So let's see in the toggle camera. So here in the dispatch queue main, that means it runs in the next run loop, I'm going to have a switch over the currently set camera position. And if we are on back camera, I'll be calling this set of code to initialize the front capture device and call the initialize capture. But now we don't need the completion block for the initialize capture session, as we have set this to nil initially. And once we have set this up here, I'm going to set the class property back to front, because if the user is currently on the back camera, we need to switch it to the front camera. So we are switching the property also. Similarly, if we are already on the front camera, I'm going to reverse the process. I will say back capture device and self.get back video capture device, call in the initialize capture session by passing in the capture device and say back capture device, but we don't need the completion handler here. And same way, we are going to set the class property to the opposite of the front, that is the back camera. Next, we will look at improving privacy in the app switcher. By that, I mean if the user has put our application in background mode and he or she visits the app switcher. So what we had done in the previous video, we added a privacy view for using visual effect view, the blur effect. So the user could not see the camera's contents, which was last going on. But today, we will improve the code a bit more. What we will do is we will stop the capture session when the user goes to the background, and we will resume the session back again when the user comes back to the application. So let's see how we can do that. So while in the capture session controller, let's create two new methods in the public area of where we have the class definition on the top. Here I'll be creating two methods. One will be called stop running and start running. Here I will be calling the capture session to stop running, and same way I will be calling the capture session to start run. And next, in the register for notifications, under the capture view controller, where we were registering the updates when the user is going to the background, our notification was getting fired. So under that method for register for notifications, we will be calling our code. In the application did become active, we will say self.capture session controller to start run, And when the application is going to the background, we will say capture session controller to stop running. Now, when the user switches from the back camera to the front camera, we need to hide the switch zoom view. And when the user switches back again to the back camera, we need to show the switch zoom view. But first we need to know the current camera position. So let's see how we can do that. So let's head to the capture session controller, and here we are going to have a new type alias for the toggle completion handler. So let's have a type alias for that, capture session toggle completion handler, and I'm going to set its property as camera position that we need to return to the calling method. And then in the toggle camera, we need to have the completion handler over here. Let's say we keep its type, make sure we keep its type as escaping, and toggle capture session toggle completion handler. And once everything is set up, here I'm going to call the completion handler with the self.CameraPosition. And like before, if we don't want this to be a compulsory call where we always need to supply the completion handler, we can keep this as an optional and pass in the default value as nil. But here also make sure we call this as an optional property. Next, we will be updating the call for the toggle camera where we are going to handle the completion handler. So let's head to the capture view controller, and where we were calling the completion handler, let's change this code a bit, where we are going to say I need the completion handler and I need to also get the camera position as a property, and I'm going to switch over the camera position. If I'm on the front camera, and also I need to have a weak self, always make sure whenever we are in the block, we need to have the self as weak. Otherwise, we will have memory leaks. Guard let self equals self, else return. And if we are already on the front camera, if we toggled and switched to the front camera, we need to say the switch zoom view is hidden set to true. And if we are on the back camera, we need to unhide, that means show the switch zoom view. But we also have a property that we should take into account, that is the should hide switch zoom view is not set. That means it is not true. Then only we should show the switch zoom view. Now we will look into focus and exposure. So when the user taps anywhere on the preview view, we need to get that tapped position and make sure we set the focus for our capture session to that, and also the exposure. At the same time, we will add an extra code and functionality that will keep on monitoring that area, and it will update its exposure and update the focus area also when anything changes in that area. So let's see how we can do that. So let's head to the capture view controller nib file and open up the right bar where we have certain controls, and also I'm going to have a new view and I'm going to add it on top of our preview, the visual effect view. I'm going to select the view and set its constraints to the safe areas all. Safe area, yeah, right side also is safe area, and the bottom also is safe area. Set all its constraints values set to 0. And I'm also going to make its background color set to clear color. I will be also adding its label as an overlay view. While this view is selected, I'll be adding a tap gesture recognizer to the same view for the overlay. Let's create the IB outlets now by heading to the Swift file of Capture View Controller. Let's head to the top area, and after the visual effect view, I'm going to have an IB outlet property over here. Private vvar overlay view UI view. And also I'll be creating an IB action for the tap gesture recognizer. I'll be calling this overlay view tap handler and going to have a the parameter as tap gesture recognizer of type UI tap gesture recognizer, and head to the nib file to connect the IB outlet and IB action for the overlay view. Select the overlay view, and in the connections new reference outlet you can connect to the file owner, select the overlay view, or you can select the file owner and do the reverse that I have done just now. And same way for the tap gesture, I can select this received actions connection for the overlay view tap handler connected to the tap gesture recognizer. Make sure that our connections are set up properly. And also for the overlay view, we have the tap and we have the overlay view as the IB IB outlet. Let's head back to the Swift file now and hide the right bar. We will be going to the capture session controller and create a new method in the public area where we have the class definition. We are going to call it setFocus, where we will be having some additional parameters over here. We're going to say focus mode is of type AV capture device dot focus mode, and exposure mode of type AV capture device dot exposure mode. And also we need to have the point of interest for the focus and the exposure. We're going to say add point device point of type CG point, and also we're going to have should monitor subject area change and of type bool. We will start by checking if we can get the captured device from our class property. Otherwise, we will return early from the method. We will also need to have the lock for configuration from the capture device. So this is why we need to wrap it in the do try block. So capture device dot get the lock for configuration, but make sure we call the try, and this is the capture, the catch block, sorry, and it's of type NS error. And I'm going to have a print statement over here so we can know early, so we can know what's really going on with the lock. Here I'm going to say failed to get lock for configuration on capture device with error, and I'm going to pass my error to the print statement and also return early from the method. Let's make up some space so it's readable. And now before setting the focus, we should check if we are able to set the focus and if the focus setting on the capture device is supported. We will be saying capture device is focus point of interest supported, and if the capture device is focus mode supported for the past focus mode. Then only we will call the capture device focus point of interest is the device point, and capture device dot focus mode is the past focus mode. Similarly, we will be handling the exposure code. If capture device is exposure mode point of interest supported, and capture device is exposure mode supported for the past exposure mode. We are going to set the exposure point of interest to the past device point from the parameter, and capture device exposure mode is going to be the new exposure mode. And once all of this code is set up, make sure always to release the configuration, the unlock for configuration. Capture device, unlock for configuration. Before calling the unlock for configuration, we need to say if the subject area change monitoring is enabled or not based on the request from the method should monitor subject area change. Since monitoring the subject area changes is a repeated process, AVFoundation keeps on posting the notification whenever the subject area has been modified. So we need to have a method where we are going to answer the calls for the notifications of the subject area changes. So let's go ahead and create that method. Let's head to the top of the file where we are in the public area. Here I'm going to create, actually it was the same place. So here I'll be calling a method, creating a method that will be responsible for answering the calls for the subject area changes. I'm going to call it subject area did change notification handler, and I'm going to have it type the parameter of notification of type notification. Here I'm going to have a device point of CG point and set its value to 0.5. Same thing for the Y. And call in our set focus, where we are saying we need the continuous autofocus and we need the continuous auto exposure. Point will be the device point that we have created and should monitor subject area changes set to false. Next, we will be heading to the Initialize capture session, where once we are able to add the input, the device input, here we will be first calling the remove observer for the notification of subject area, and we will be adding the observer for the subject area changes. We will be calling notification center dot default remove observer for the name. Here the observer is self and notification is subject AV capture device subject area did change. Object is going to be the capture device. Let's break up this into multiple lines so it is readable. And we will be calling the notification center default that we need to add an observer for the selector, and where the observer is self and selector is the selector method subject area did change notification handler, where we created this earlier. Make sure we break up this piece of code into multiple lines where we have multiple so it's readable. And the name will be subject AV capture device subject area did change. Object is going to be the capture device. Now we will be going to the capture view controller and adding an extra code for the overlay tab handler. So when the user taps on any of the area, we need to get the device position where the user tapped and call our method from the capture session controller. So let's go ahead and do that. We will be going to the capture view controller, and in the overlay view tap handler method, we will be writing the following code. We will get the tap view from the tap gesture recognizer, give us the view of the tapped area, and we will be also getting the location of the view where the user has tapped. Then we will be having a new variable over here for device point, and we are going to say video preview view.video preview layer capture device point converted from layer point will be the tap location. And we will be calling our capture session controller to set the focus as autofocus, auto expose, point will be the device point that we have created, and here we are going to pass true for monitoring the subject area changes. So we will be testing our code now, and I have my phone connected now, and when I run the application on my phone, and I have also QuickTime open up over here. So we can confirm that our views are loaded up in the proper place, whatever we had set the code for that. And also when we switch from the back camera to the front camera, we notice the switch zoom view has been hidden from this place. And when the user taps the toggle camera, switches back again to the back camera, we get back the switch zoom view. There was some problem with the visual effect view. It had, by mistake, it went below the view. So we make sure we have the video preview view here and the visual effect view over here on top of the video preview view. Otherwise, our blur effect won't happen when the application is going to the background in the app switcher. So now when I run the application and I have QuickTime, and the moment I try to go to the background, earlier we had only the option of blurring the display, but now the camera also stops updating its content. So I'm moving the phone now, the camera, but we don't see any updates. And when I come back to the camera application, the session is resumed. And finally, when we are having the camera application running, we can tap on any area where we can get the exposure level and also the focus. So if I tap on my monitor area, the display, which is pretty bright, I get the proper focus now and the exposure correctly. And if I tap my ceiling area, which is on the top area over here, I get the proper exposure level. Same way, when I switch to the front, I can tap the different areas, the dark areas and the bright areas. So I'm tapping on my forehead area, which is brighter than the curtains area behind me. And if I tap on the curtain areas here, you can see the exposure getting updated and also the focus point. So this is our code that we have added. With that, we conclude today's video. Stay tuned to the channel for amazing content. If you like the video, hit like. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want me to cover any extra material in future, mention that in the comments. I'll be covering that later on. Alright guys, thank you so much. Bye-bye.